Hello and welcome to Drunk on Tea. Even after painting a miniature to a standard you're happy with, there's one final step that seems to cause a lot of people frustration. Applying transfers seems to be the last big hurdle for a lot of mini painters, that final finishing touch that really marks a model as complete. Today I'm going to show you how to apply transfers without the need for expensive chemicals like Micro Sol and Micro Set. If you have the tools to make and paint the mini, you already have everything you need to apply the transfers that come with it. I've just finished painting the Intercessor squad from the Armageddon set in a retro 2nd edition style that I'm painting the whole box in. Subscribe if you'd like to follow me on that retro journey. And now I need to finish them off by adding the chapter and company markings to their pauldrons. First, I'm using Technical Storm Shield varnish, but any varnish will work, I just happen to have this one lying around. I'm applying this all over the area that I'm going to apply the transfers. The varnish will create a smooth surface on the mini, which will allow the transfer to slide around easily as I move it into place. To make sure there isn't an odd look to the finished model, I'm applying the varnish all over the area or panel that I'm going to apply the transfer. So in this case the shoulder pad, and on some models the knee pad as well. If you just apply the varnish to the area that you want the transfer to cover, the different finishes across the surfaces will be noticeable and look odd at the end, so it's best to apply it across the whole surface. I'm applying the transfers to the whole squad in one go, so I'm making sure I apply this varnish to all the areas on all the models that I'm going to be applying the transfers. As much as I hate batch painting miniatures, applying transfers to lots of models at once makes the process a lot quicker and reduces the amount of time you have to sit and wait for things like varnish to dry. Trust me, there is nothing more frustrating than putting the transfer on a single Space Marine and then just sitting there waiting for each step to dry before you can move on to the next step. So after you've applied the varnish to all of the models, give it a bit of time to fully dry. This will vary depending on the brand of varnish, but with this Technical Storm Shield it takes about 10 minutes or so. By working this batch, the first model is almost dry by the time I'm done with the last one. After the varnish is dry, the model doesn't look any different, but the surface of the pauldrons should be nice and smooth now. Now it's time to cut out the transfers you're going to use. The Armageddon set comes with transfers for a few chapters, however these are more modern designs of Blood Angels markings, so I'm going to be using an older set that I have laying around. Using a hobby knife, carefully cut around the transfers you want to remove, making sure you leave a bit of space around the transfer. This way you can reduce the risk of slipping and cutting the transfer. You can use scissors for this, but I find a craft knife has a bit more control about where I'm cutting. After cutting horizontally, I'm now making a vertical cut so the transfers will come out on their own individual squares. As I'm doing the retro style, I'm also removing this yellow chapter marking. Another advantage of the craft knife is I can remove a transfer from anywhere on the sheet, unlike with scissors where I would need to cut in from an edge. With the chapter markings, I'm going to make a few cuts that will sit on the curved surface of the shoulder pad better. I'm making one cut at the top, avoiding the actual image, just cutting the clear transfer part, and 2 diagonal cuts at the bottom, also near the image. Now the transfers are cut out, I'm taking a bit of sponge or foam. This one is from an old blister pack, but any kitchen sponge or bit of foam you have lying around is fine. I'm going to wet this under the tap. I don't want it to be soaking wet, just a bit damp, to help lift the transfers, so I'll go and wet this now. And now it's slightly damp, you can see the water isn't pouring out of it, but it just comes to the surface when squeezed. Now I'm getting the model I want to apply the transfers to ready, and I'm adding the transfers to the sponge. This way the paper will start to absorb some of the water from the sponge, and this will help the transfer to lift off without tearing. With clean water, I'm applying a few drops of water to the surface of the transfers and repeating this process until the transfers become loose. It may take a few minutes for the transfers to start to lift, but they will start to move around as you touch them with a paintbrush. It's important to not try to dig under the transfer with your brush or you'll rip the transfer. Just wait until it lifts off the paper on its own and will slide around freely without the need to apply any pressure. Now with water, I'm wetting the area that I'm going to apply the transfer. This will help the transfer slide easier onto the model and help with placing it. Then I can pick up the transfer with my paintbrush. It may want to slide away at first, in this case onto the sponge. The brush will hold the transfer, and then I can place it onto the shoulder pad roughly where I want it. Gently with my brush, I'm flattening the transfer down. The cuts I made earlier will allow the transfer to shape around the shoulder pad and lay flat. I'm also pushing out any air bubbles with my paintbrush as well, so the surface of the transfer is smooth. If you notice the transfer is a bit wonky or needs to be moved, use a wet brush. It's easy to push the transfer around to position it exactly where you want the transfer to be. It's the main reason I wet the area before applying the transfer. Once you have the transfer in a spot you're happy with, try to avoid touching it again while you apply the others. Now I'm wetting the other shoulder pad and applying the company markings onto the other shoulder. But as before, I'm applying the transfer roughly where I want it to be, and then removing any air bubbles and sliding it around until it ends up in a position that I'm happy with on the model. Sometimes a small push can send the transfer a long way. This happens, just take your time when positioning the transfer and it will eventually end up in the place you want. And after applying the transfer on the first model, it's now time to repeat the process 9 more times and apply them onto all the others. After you have the transfers in a position that you're happy with, it's important to not touch them, as they can stick to your fingers or get moved around. If you do find that a transfer has moved after you've placed it and moved on to other models, you can simply wet the area again and with a wet brush move it around again until it's back where you want it. Once the area has dried, the transfers should stay in place, but they are quite brittle after being applied, so it's best to avoid touching the area until you can seal that transfer in, and I'll show you that in the next step. Another advantage of working in a batch is by the time I'm finished and I've had a cup of tea, the models will be dry enough to get straight onto sealing them, so the whole process is done nice and quickly. After the areas have dried, you can see there's a sheen to the finish on the transfers, so now I'm going to seal them and get rid of that shine all in one go. I'm doing this by varnishing the area again, and applying this all over the area that I varnished before applying the transfer. This layer will lock the transfer in, stop it from moving or getting damaged if it gets touched, as well as remove the shine that comes from the transfer paper. Technical Storm Shield is a satin varnish, which I quite like for my minis, but some people prefer matte or gloss, so what varnish you use is up to you, but I wouldn't use a spray varnish for setting transfers. If you spray varnish your minis, apply it after using a brush on varnish to set the transfers, otherwise the spray can end up lifting the transfers and setting them in a different position. Like the varnish before applying the transfers, I'm applying this to the whole area, not just over the transfer. That way I'm making sure that the transfer is fully sealed down and the finish will be even across the whole area, rather than having some parts matte and some parts satin. Just a single coat of varnish will do, there's no need to layer it on too thick. Just one layer will stop any damage to the transfer, stop it from accidentally lifting up if the area gets wet or anything somehow gets underneath the transfer. Just remember to apply this varnish layer to all the areas you applied transfers to, and once it dries, your miniatures are truly finished with no more empty shoulder pads. You can see how once the varnish has dried, it's removed that shine effect to the transfer and given an even finish across the shoulder pad. And that is how to apply smooth transfers without the need for micro sol and micro set, like so many others online say you need. Of course, these tools have their use, especially for more complex transfers and for really uneven surfaces, but for basic Space Marine ones, just water and some patience is all you need. Please let me know in the comments down below, do you struggle with transfers, or are there any more hobby tips that you would like to know? But thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and happy painting.